Today I'm going to show you how to increase the lifespan of your electronic drum set. That's coming up. What's up, Justin Greenwald here. Welcome to 65 Drums. This is the place to keep on top of all things EDM related, so consider subscribing if you haven't yet. This is a requested video. I've been asked how to make your electronic drums last longer. Now, this is actually a little more complicated than it sounds. There are metal cymbals, there are rubber cymbals, there are mesh drum pads, there are rubber drum pads, there are silicone drum pads. There are so many different types of materials made with electronic drums. The focus of this video is going to lean a little more heavily towards mesh drum pads because they have the highest potential to get damaged, but I'm going to talk about rubber pads as well. Number one, buy a rock solid drum set to begin with. I'm sorry, but if you buy an Alesis drum set, a cat percussion drum set, or a Simmons drum set, or anything like that, you have a shelf life on that drum set. People always hate it when I say this, but any company that uses Medeli pads isn't going to last forever. It's just a fact. I want to clarify this. The drum rack might be okay. The drum pads might be okay. The drum module might work for years. The cymbals, however, the cymbals are always the ones that are the first to go. So Medeli makes a lot of cymbals. They're the ones that make the cat percussion cymbals, a lot of the Alesis cymbals, a lot of the Simmons cymbals, and a lot of the Pearl cymbals. And they're all exactly the same. They have different coats of paint, they have different logos on them, but they're all exactly the same. And these cymbals don't last forever. In fact, I have two of these Medeli cymbals that are having issues right now. And that's why I can't say buy a drum set using those parts if you want to play it for 10 years. Now, again, if you're just wanting to play this drum set for 2.5 years and then move on to something else later on, that's completely fine. It also depends on how heavy of a hitter you are. But the whole point of this first tip is that if you want a drum set that will last, 10 years or something, go buy a Yamaha drum set or a Roland drum set. They last the longest. I love the look and the feel of Yamaha pads. They're really, really fun to play, but one thing to keep in mind is that even though they've got great durability, if you damage them somehow, you kind of just have to throw that pad away and buy a new one. At least with a mesh drum head, you can always replace it. So if you accidentally cut through one of your mesh drum heads, doesn't matter. Just go buy a new one. If this one breaks, doesn't matter. Go buy a new one. And there are lots of different options, a lot of different textures you can buy. But on the flip side, in Yamaha's favor, you don't have to worry about some sort of foam cone going bad and getting brittle or something. And you probably won't ever have to replace a piezo unit. So yes, there are pros and cons of buying both Roland and Yamaha pads. Now, I don't want to make a giant blanket statement about all electronic drums that aren't Roland and Yamaha. Obviously, there are plenty of companies that make very nice, high-quality electronic cymbals. But in the majority of cases, Roland and Yamaha look the best, they have the most natural swaying motion, and they last the longest with the best trigger accuracy. My next tip is use clean-cut drumsticks that are brand new if you're just getting into electronic drumming. So, it's not that expensive. Just go spend $8, get a nice pair of brand new drumsticks. It can be a little bit tempting to use the old sticks you used on your acoustic drums. And the problem with these guys is that they start flaking like this. This can snag on your mesh drum head, especially if the tip has sharp edges because it's been chipped. That can actually make little micro tears into your mesh drum head, and eventually you can actually rip a hole right through it. I've done this personally multiple times. And while I'm holding this thing, remember, put rubber rims on your electronic drums, and if you already have rubber rims on them, don't remove them like I did, because this again will tear up your drumsticks. This pair of drumsticks, where'd it go? I don't know where it went. This drumstick right here wasn't damaged because I was playing it on an acoustic drum. It was damaged because I didn't have rubber rims on my electronic drums. Cymbals do a lot of damage to sticks, but also just not having a rim can damage your sticks as well. That's why leaving the rims on your electronic drums can help save you a bunch of sticks, and it can save the lifespan of your mesh drum heads as well. As far as tom and snare rubber pads, those things are practically indestructible, so a crappy pair of sticks won't hurt them. But your cymbals are a different matter because they're at just the correct angle so that when you start going like that, it's basically, you hear that? It's basically a saw blade when you hit your rubber cymbals. So crappy sticks can still hurt your rubber cymbals regardless. So just stick with a clean cut pair of drumsticks that you haven't used on acoustic drums, and remember to keep the rubber rims on your electronic drums if at all possible. My next tip is about beaters that you're using with your mesh kick drum heads. So a mesh kick drum head is actually susceptible to damage to certain kinds of kick drum beaters. The ones made by Trick, that if you turn them sideways, they're kind of like a dagger, or even something like iron cobra beaters from a generation ago. What happened was I wasn't looking and it turned sideways, and it was basically like a knife that sliced right through my drum head. Not in one clean stroke, but I was playing and I wasn't paying attention, damaged the foam that was sitting behind it. So just keep an eye out for those certain kinds of kick drum beaters. Obviously something like this is completely harmless. It's basically round and there's no sharp edges, so you're completely fine. But not really, because you're not supposed to use felt with mesh drums. So if you want to use a felt drum beater with a mesh kick drum head, you're actually supposed to put a patch on the kick drum head. Anything like an Evans kick drum patch, any standard acoustic kick drum patch, or even electronic kick drum patches from companies like Drumtech that you can use as well, that also offer a little bit of dampening. But if you don't want to use a kick drum patch, just use a plastic kick drum beater or a wood kick drum beater, or just something that's not felt, because this can actually, again, put a hole through your mesh kick drum over time with enough use. My next tip for improving the lifespan of your electronic drums is when you're traveling with them. So if you're about to go to a gig with your electronic drums for the first time, try to use a little bit of padding with your electronic drums, or just be careful with them in general. Imagine that you've got a mesh drum pad, like this one right here. It's sitting on the seat of your car, and then all of a sudden, a hi-hat stand falls and just pokes a hole right through it. Weird stuff like this happens to musicians at the worst possible moments, so just be careful when you're transporting your electronic drums. There are even some cases that you can buy for your electronic drums if you really want to go all the way. Go check out my video on how to transport your electronic drums, where you'll see that I'm not actually careful when I transport my electronic drums. But I had to say it in this tip anyway. My next tip is that if you want to increase the lifespan of the rubber on your drums, use something like 303 Aerospace Cleaner. If you want to check out this review, I'll leave a link in the description below. Also, Dr. Kenndo works really, really well. It's not really sold in America very much. I found it on Amazon for $100 a bottle, which is why I never bought it. But if you're in Europe, go pick up a bottle of that stuff because it works very well. I'll leave a link to that review down in the description below as well. Now, I can't promise a product like this will give your pads 10 more years of shiny life, but at the same time, if your electronic drum set is sitting near a window, the sunlight can damage those electronic drum pads. Just as a quick example of how this works, I've got a couch up in my living room that has darker fabric on one side and lighter fabric on the other side that's closest to the window. So sun can damage your electronic drums, you know, over a period of years. So if you want to be ultra protective of your electronic drums, maybe use some sort of rubber cleaner / protectant. My next tip is that if you're using brushes with your electronic drums, stay away from metal brushes and use nylon brushes. If you want to see a video of me testing electronic drums with nylon brushes, I'll leave a link to that video in the description below. All right, the last tip isn't really a tip. Basically, the lifespan of your electronic drums goes down to the quality of the initial product and how many years you're actually playing it. There are guys that have got electronic drum sets that last decades and decades because they never play them. And then there are guys that play one drum set every single day and it only lasts a handful of years because they've put heavy use and they're heavy hitters. There are a lot of different factors that go into making your electronic drums last longer. But basically, if you're just smart and you do the common sense stuff, you can make your drum set last a couple more years if you take care of it. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you loved it, give it a like. If you hated it, give it a dislike. See you guys in a few.